From the dawn of civilization, humanity has faced countless challenges, but few threats have proven as persistent and terrifying as pandemics. Throughout history, infectious diseases have swept across the globe, leaving devastation in their wake. The rise of cities created ideal breeding grounds for disease, and trade routes became vectors for contagion. But how did these pandemics end? What forces conspired to bring these periods of unimaginable suffering to a close? Our journey begins in the 6th century AD at the height of the Byzantine Empire. This was a time of great ambition and expansion, with the empire stretching across vast territories encompassing diverse cultures and peoples. The Emperor Justinian dreamt of restoring the Roman Empire to its former glory, but his vision was shattered by the Justinianic plague. Justinian was a ruler of immense ambition, known for his legal reforms and monumental building projects, including the Hagia Sophia. This plague, likely a variant of bubonic plague, emerged from Egypt, spreading along the bustling trade routes of the Byzantine Empire. These routes, which once brought wealth and prosperity, now became conduits for death and despair. Constantinople, the empire's beating heart, became a breeding ground for the disease. The city's dense population and constant flow of people made it an ideal environment for the plague to thrive. The symptoms were horrifying: swollen lymph nodes, grotesque black boils, and a fever that consumed its victims. The sight of these symptoms struck fear into the hearts of the people, as the disease showed no mercy. The people of Constantinople, desperate for a reprieve, turned to their faith, crowding into churches, only hastening the disease's spread. In their desperation, they sought divine intervention, but their gatherings only fueled the plague's relentless advance. As the plague tightened its grip, bodies piled up in the streets, overwhelming burial grounds. The sheer number of deaths made it impossible to bury the dead properly, leading to mass graves and a pervasive sense of hopelessness. Justinian himself fell ill but clung to life. His survival was seen as a miracle, but it did little to stem the tide of the plague that continued to ravage his empire. The plague's impact was devastating, killing an estimated 25 to 50 million people. This staggering loss of life left entire communities decimated and the empire's infrastructure in ruins. The empire, once on the cusp of reclaiming its former glory, was crippled. The economic and social fabric of the Byzantine Empire was torn apart, leaving it vulnerable to external threats and internal strife. The Justinianic plague receded not because of any cure, but because it had consumed so many, leaving a diminished population with some level of immunity. The survivors emerged into a changed world, one where the dreams of empire had been irrevocably altered by the brutal reality of the plague. In the 14th century, the Black Death, a form of bubonic plague, swept across Asia and Europe, leaving unimaginable suffering in its wake. This pandemic was one of the deadliest in human history, decimating populations and altering the course of societies. Spread by fleas on rats, it could lay low a healthy individual within days. The rapid transmission of the disease was exacerbated by the lack of medical knowledge and the unsanitary living conditions of the time. Victims endured agonizing symptoms, including the appearance of painful, swollen lymph nodes that turned black. These symptoms were often accompanied by fever, chills, and vomiting, making the suffering even more unbearable. The Black Death spared no one. Tearing through villages, towns, and cities, entire communities were wiped out, and the social fabric of medieval Europe was torn apart. People turned to desperate measures: prayer, bloodletting, and self-flagellation, but the plague marched on. These practices, rooted in superstition and fear, offered little to no relief from the relentless spread of the disease. Yet from this tragedy, the concept of quarantine emerged. Authorities began to understand that isolating the sick could help prevent the spread of the disease. Ships arriving from infected ports were forced to remain anchored offshore for 40 days, a quarantine. This period of isolation was based on the belief that it would allow time for any potential symptoms to manifest. This practice proved surprisingly effective, allowing time for infected individuals to either recover or succumb to the disease. It was a rudimentary but crucial step in controlling the spread of the plague. While quarantine couldn't stop the Black Death, it marked a turning point in humanity's understanding of disease. The realization that isolation could mitigate the spread of illness was a significant advancement. It sowed the seeds for future public health measures. The principles of quarantine laid the groundwork for more sophisticated methods of disease control in the centuries to come. The Black Death became a catalyst for change, recognizing the importance of isolation and containment. This understanding was crucial in shaping the development of modern public health strategies. This horrific chapter in human history also became a lesson in the power of organized public health interventions. The collective efforts to combat the plague highlighted the need for coordinated responses to health crises. It demonstrated that even in the face of an invisible enemy, human ingenuity could make a difference. The legacy of the Black Death's quarantine practices continues to influence how we manage epidemics and pandemics today. The year 1665 saw London gripped by the Great Plague. The city was ripe for an outbreak, its crowded streets and inadequate sanitation providing fertile ground for the plague's advance. The disease, once again the bubonic plague, spread rapidly. Unlike previous generations, the people of London took action, guided by a growing understanding of contagion. City officials, under Lord Mayor Sir John Lawrence, implemented stringent measures to combat the plague's spread. Houses with plague victims were sealed shut, the sick confined within and the healthy forced to remain indoors. Red crosses were painted on the doors of infected households. The cries of the dead carts collecting the deceased became a familiar sound. Searchers were tasked with identifying the sick and ensuring their isolation. Large public gatherings were banned, and trade was strictly regulated. These measures, though draconian, were a collective effort to stem the tide of death. London's response to the Great Plague laid the groundwork for modern public health practices. Few diseases have cast as long and terrifying a shadow over humanity as smallpox. For millennia, this viral scourge left behind a trail of disfigurement and death. Its symptoms were unmistakable: fever, vomiting, and painful pustules covering the body. Smallpox was a constant threat lurking in the shadows. In a world without vaccines, people were largely at the mercy of this invisible enemy. Some cultures practiced a form of inoculation, but it was risky. In the late 18th century, a breakthrough occurred, the advent of vaccination. Edward Jenner, an English physician, observed that milkmaids who contracted cowpox seemed immune to smallpox. In 1796, he inoculated a young boy with pus from a cowpox lesion. The boy developed a mild fever but quickly recovered. Weeks later, Jenner inoculated the boy with smallpox, and the boy remained healthy. Jenner's discovery ushered in the era of vaccination. Smallpox was steadily pushed to the brink of extinction thanks to widespread vaccination campaigns. In 1980, the World Health Organization declared smallpox eradicated, a testament to the power of scientific inquiry and vaccination. As the 19th century dawned, London faced a new enemy: cholera. This deadly disease would soon become one of the most feared in the city, striking without warning and spreading rapidly through the population. This waterborne disease struck with frightening speed, leaving a trail of misery and death. Entire families were wiped out and communities were left in despair as they struggled to understand and combat this invisible killer. The symptoms were sudden and debilitating: profuse diarrhea, vomiting, and severe dehydration. Victims often succumbed within hours, their bodies ravaged by the relentless onslaught of the disease. The prevailing miasma theory blamed cholera on foul air. It was widely believed that the disease was spread through the noxious vapors emanating from decaying organic matter. Enter Dr. John Snow, a London physician who suspected that cholera was spread through contaminated water. His groundbreaking hypothesis challenged the established medical beliefs of the time. Snow focused on a hard-hit area of London's Soho, where a cholera outbreak in 1854 had claimed hundreds of lives. This densely populated neighbourhood became the epicenter of his investigation. He meticulously mapped out the locations of cholera deaths, marking each one on a map of the neighbourhood. This detailed approach allowed him to identify patterns and pinpoint the source of the outbreak. A chilling realization emerged: the majority of deaths clustered around a single public water pump on Broad Street. This discovery was a turning point in Snow's investigation. Snow's map became crucial evidence in his fight to convince the authorities of water's role in transmitting cholera. He presented his findings with unwavering determination, despite facing significant opposition. Despite resistance, Snow's relentless pursuit of the truth prevailed. His evidence was compelling, and it gradually began to sway the opinions of the medical community and public health officials. The authorities agreed to remove the pump handle, cutting off access to the contaminated water source. This decisive action marked a significant victory in the battle against cholera. Almost immediately, the number of new cholera cases plummeted. The removal of the pump handle had a dramatic and immediate impact on the spread of the disease. Snow's work marked a turning point in our understanding of how diseases spread and laid the foundation for modern epidemiology. His innovative approach and unwavering dedication to uncovering the truth have left an enduring legacy in the field of public health. As we reflect on past pandemics, we see a common thread: the human spirit's resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering. Each pandemic spurred innovation, driving us to find new ways to combat these invisible enemies. From quarantine measures to vaccination and modern epidemiology, each pandemic offered valuable lessons. We are no longer defenseless against these invisible foes, armed with scientific knowledge and advanced medical technologies. By supporting public health initiatives and promoting vaccination, we can ensure a healthier, safer future for generations to come.